The objective today is to write a large program from scratch when given directions for each step, and this is essentially a part 2 lesson. If you didn't watch part 1, you might want to go back now, or else this one won't be very helpful. So last time we talked, we created this large function called setBoard to set up our game board. Now we need to work on some of the logic that runs the game. Now in this game, the correct button is the one we randomly chose to make a different color. And we should have already created this console.log message that tells us the ID of that box, just in case you're pretty color blind like me and you can't even tell the difference in the color change. And like it says right here, it is going to make future work much easier when we use console statements. So this should look familiar to you. We've talked about having a parent algorithm and then children of it. Overall, the setBoard function will do the following. It's going to generate random colors, make all 4 buttons have the same background color. It's going to pick a random button ID to change that background color to something different. There's the link if you need it. And just so you know, I couldn't walk you through each step because I don't think that'd be very helpful to you to just copy what I'm doing. But it'd be good for you to see some of the mistakes I make. Like I had to debug immediately while creating this program. Apparently I had an extra line of code in there that was turning 2 boxes to a different color. So I make mistakes still to this day. I just want to encourage you not to get down if you're struggling. So now that we created the setBoard function, what's next? Well, we need a function that will check to see if the button the user clicked was the actual correct button of the different colored button or different colored box. And every time the function goes through that check, it should probably make sure the board is set up again for the next player to take their turn. And notice this is still pseudocode. It looks very close to code, but it's not perfect. It's missing some semicolons and such, so definitely feel free to create pseudocode before you type it out on the App Lab. And one thing I want to tell you I liked about Alexis's and Michael's conversation is they determined the need for a global variable, and then they determined a new parameter to check against that variable. So right here we have a randomButtonID. It's a global variable because more than one function will need it. And inside this setBoard function, it's going to use that variable to pick the button we're going to change the color to. And a nice thing to remember is putting all your event handlers at the bottom of your code is good practice because you know exactly where it is if you need to change any of these event handlers. So the money-making part of their conversation, I think, is when Alexis and Michael talk about breaking things into pieces. They have a global variable for the correct button. They have 4 event handlers, and they have created a function called checkCorrect. And what are they checking? The ID of the button that has the different color. And they're adding if statements to verify for correctness. So at this point, I have the whole code right here, at least what I created. And if you're getting behind or getting stuck, I'm going to paste this on Canvas for you to use. I think the ability to read code at this point is going to be much more important than just writing code off the top of your head. And thank goodness you don't have to do that for the tests because you'll have ample resources to lean on to get some working code going. And another reason to just copy and paste this code is I think code.org's app can be glitchy. I'm using Chrome. But at the end of the day, if you are missing one single semicolon somewhere, let's not freak out about that. Let's just paste this so you have something that's working and we can move on. We can move on with creating other parts of the program. So you're going to want to add a simple if-else statement inside the function called checkCorrect. And what that's doing is it's going to compare the button ID and the random button ID. And then display a message to the console. So right here, if the button ID equals random button ID, then say you got it right, or else it's going to be wrong. So now that we established that, under the checkCorrect function, what's next? Well, we need some way to let the person playing the app know if it's their turn or not. We're going to have a 2-player option here in this app. So that means we're going to need another global variable. So we're going to have one called current player and set the initial value to 1. And down here, we need to create a new function, and let's call it switch player function. And the pseudocode for that is pretty simple. If the current player is the 1, and the pseudocode for that is a little complicated, but try to follow along with me. If the current player is 1, well, after that person's turn, right, they're going to be here in the checkCorrect. They're going to click a button and it's going to check if it's correct. And whether it is or not, what happens is the computer will need to reset the board and the computer will need to switch the player. So instead of player 1, now we'll need player 2 to take a turn. So with that said, that's one of those situations where you just want to code it up and start running and testing to see if it's working. Here's the link again. Your goal is to get to the 17th bubble and then come back to the video, because by the 17th bubble you'll be dreaming in code, and I think that'll have to be enough for today. One more suggestion before I let you go. I suggest typing it out yourself, the code that is, and then copy and paste the example code, because by doing that, that's how I found my mistake when I had accidentally capitalized the D in the random_buttonID variable. I had random I capital D capital, so when you paste it alongside your code, that's how you can also find some of the little mistakes that the computer's not necessarily going to catch. So you've gotten to bubble 17, you've come back here, this is the end of the lesson, so pick a IB attribute to connect to today's work. I thought today's stuff was still a thinker kind of attribute, because you're asking to make good decisions, you're asking to solve problems on your own. And the DOL is, I just need to see your switch player function, so on a piece of paper, write it out, and you'll get to insert it into the interpreter near my desk. Now, one piece of advice with this: the hide element and show element commands are found in the UI controls toolbox. So to show and hide these gray rectangles, you're going to want to use these commands. And just because I can't help myself, I'm going to go ahead and provide an exemplary code example here. I don't want you to copy it, but I want you to use it as a resource to compare with your own code and just make sure you got something that's working.